Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Wallace, and today I want to talk about this article I read called New Business Model in the Growing Esports Industry. It was published last year in 2017 in the 11th volume of Business Excellence. Unfortunately, I cannot pronounce the three authors' names, but I do know they're from Croatia, and that is an important detail for later. Alright, let's get to it. So, what does the article try to do? What is it trying to address? In the introduction and the abstract, it says that the main goals of the paper are about how to properly use the growing video game industry and from an entrepreneur's perspective, how to make money basically. So, and then it wants to compare it to, or the esports market to traditional sports as they call it, because a lot of people say these things are different. And how do I take this? Well, the authors are, like I said, trying to find a way to make money from esports. To do that, they need to understand why people like esports and how this can be taken up to its fullest. It should be noticed that the authors do not support the claim that esports and traditional sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer or football do not fill the same category. I can make arguments for both sides of this, but given how vast the term sports can be, I do believe it will not be long before the E in esports is dropped, but that is for another video. Is the title appropriate and clear? New business model in the growing esports industry. When I first read that, I thought, okay, this is going to be a global idea for how to integrate esports into everyday business, or at least make money off of it better than what is currently being used. And while it's somewhat true, this is more, it kind of fails because the article is mostly talking about how they could integrate esports in Croatia, which is the home country of the authors. So while it does talk a lot about the growing esports industry, I wish that it was more along the lines of new business model in Croatia or for Croatia in the growing esports industry or something along those lines. Is all the discussion relevant? I'd say yes. There were three questions that were asked and answered before they got to the business side of things, and these were like, why do people like esports? How do people watch esports? And is it truly a sport? And it goes through each of these in detail. Although I feel like there were some points that weren't fully true because not being gamers themselves, the authors lacked that immersion that somebody like a gamer or a fan of it would have. And not being in this community, they did their research and afterwards came out with the underlying assumption that gamers/watchers participate to satisfy a sense of longing for a group. And I don't see it like that because that's just a basic human drive is to be part of something. So I'll get more on why people like it later and how they underemphasize that. So, but how people watch esports is simple, and they got it. There's just really one platform right now, and that's Twitch TV, or just Twitch, as a lot of people call it. There is another one, YouTube, that is kind of dying out. Not YouTube is not dying out in any way, but in the esports market, it's mostly used for replays. But even that, Twitch is taking over because of it's just everywhere for a video game streaming service. And then their question is it truly a sport? They say it's close, but not there. Through their research, they said that there are 7 distinguishing characteristics of a modern sport which are used to describe sports throughout history, which these are secularization, equality, specialization, bureaucratization, rationalization, qualification, and the obsession with / the quest for records. And it hit esports, and so they say esports hits 6 out of 7 of these. The only one it lacks is the bureaucratization, which is true. If you were to look at an esports, there's not just one overarching like major network for each. If you were to look at baseball, they have the Major League they have the MLB. If you were to look at the NFL, well, for football, every of the traditional sports has their own league or one thing that unifies them. While in sports, there are many different leagues for sometimes just one game, and until it's all localized down to one, they'll never hit that. However, I feel like there's another argument that needs to be made about how much time and effort people put into esports. The amount of time, say, an Overwatch esports team can practice is 8 to 10 hours a day. Many pro athletes do this for other sports too, but I'm on a collegiate bowling team, and we bowl maybe 2 to 3 times a week, at most 3 hours a day, with 3 hours on each of those days. So in one day, some esports teams can already put in more work than a college level bowling team or some other sports that don't require you to be as physically demanding as traditional sports. Okay, before I go into this question, I have to say that I cannot be unbiased about this. I cannot be 100% objective because I want esports to be more mainstream than it is. But in terms of the authors, I feel like they really hit mostly objective. They like an A in objectiveness. The only problem I saw was that they had underlying assumptions that might have changed how they were looking at stuff, but for the most part, they were looking at just the facts and how to best make money from this. I feel like they could have done more research in terms of like talking to people who currently work in the esports industry to get a better sense of why people like it and how their plans for the future. But other than that, the only part of that their objectiveness was that they didn't do enough research because they looked at it from a psychological standpoint. So was this like important for the field that it's going into? And my answer is two big thumbs up, yes. If you want to make a debate on esports, it's easy. You could talk to people. I get in an argument with my dad sometimes about is esports actually a real sport, or like anybody that isn't older than millennial, or just a simple Google search would yield many forums, articles, videos on the growing of esports and should we really be calling it sports or just how big esports can truly be? And I always feel like it always comes down to is esports actually sports? But I feel like this article does it better where it's like it doesn't matter if it's that or not. People like this. People spend money in this. They put time and effort into this. So let's capitalize on that. And I feel like that was what they truly wanted to do. And I feel like if this were to get out, it could be a really big push for the industry. Now, despite them doing a really good job, I feel like there were four parts or four areas that were just underemphasized, and I'd like to elaborate more on that. The first area I felt like that was underemphasized was the vastness of esports' reach. This one little blurb here is the only way that it's mentioned, but it shows that the 2014 League of Legends World Championship got more viewers than the 2013 World Series clinching games, the NBA Finals, or the Stanley Cup. And sure, this 27 million is only like about a quarter of the Super Bowl's 111.5 million viewers for the 2014 year. This is nearly 4 years ago, and the article is just about how big esports is reaching. And sure, this is, like I said, 3 years before this article was written. It would have been nice to see how they talk about how big it's getting now, how many viewers Twitch has, or like how many participants Twitch has, and just talk about some of the individual leagues of esports and how they're gaining popularity as well. The second area I feel that they don't explicitly look into is why of the growth of industry. And they try saying that nobody knows why or what's the reasoning for the growth in the video game industry, but they try saying that it's due to their most accepted reasons being due to the rise and expansion of the internet, the rapid growth of the 1980s arcade games, home gaming consoles, and the release of a large number of different games. But at least in my opinion, the reason is a lot simpler. Originally, games were there to entertain kids and relieve stress. While that is true for most games, the industry has evolved and is making games for every type of person. The article states in the introduction that more Americans play video games than go to the movies. And of course they do. Today's games are more synonymous with movies and books than they were during the arcade era, but they have the added benefit of more immersion today. Why read a romantic novel when you can date a virtual character and shape the story around you? Why go see the latest horror movie and scream, don't go down those stairs, when you can try to survive a horror movie or horror game and you know not to go down those stairs? Why read the Sherlock Holmes books or watch their movies where they solve it for you, when you can experience the mystery and solve it for yourself? VR, or virtual reality, is the greatest example of this yet, where you can literally put yourself in the games. And eventually, when we have a full body system, which is in the process of being made, then an esport industry would matter on your physical shape and not just how good you are with the keyboard and mouse. The third area is similar to the second. It's why gamers like esports. Now they have two just quotes here that I would like to read out to you. Nowadays, more and more people understand esports as a synonym for big public gaming events where thousands of people play and millions watch them through various online streams. And this is exactly what I would say esports is. If you were to watch the Super Smash Bros. Tournament or the Overwatch League or the League of Legends World Series, I think that's what it's called, it's just like a big, almost not like a concert hall, but similar to that, where there's a stage and there's gamers up there, and then you have everybody in the stands watching and people online watching. But then the second quote here, the most attractive thing for esports players is actually the multiplayer nature of playing and social interactions between the players in a real or virtual environment, not the playing itself. And after that comes fun, and only after that, winning. This isn't esports at this point. And if you were to watch any Major League Gaming match, there's hardly any showcase of what the players are actually saying. Its parallels much closer to the way traditional sports are broadcasted, with gameplay on screen and most audio coming from a pair of announcers. There are some behind the scenes videos posted, but the number of views on these are minuscule compared to the actual broadcast. This quote is closer to watching Twitch streamers, which many are not a part of esports. While pro gamers can have their own Twitch accounts and stream, this isn't esports, as it doesn't have a league behind it. It's more like a game of pickup video games, without a set schedule or players. Essentially, the pull of esports come, or at least for me, playing games and wanting to improve, so I watch professional players. And sometimes I just want to watch the insane plays that they can pull off that somebody at my skill level can't. And for others, it's the same as traditional sports, where, as I had caught an argument with my dad, he's like, why would you watch somebody else play the game? But then he goes and watches, the latest Giants game. He's not playing it, and I'm not playing mine, but we both enjoy what we watch. Now, this one area is on the business side, and it's the downside of video games in trying to make money as the way they do. If you were to look at the traditional sports, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, etc., they've all been around for decades. Sure, they've evolved from other games over time, but they have a core concept that stayed the same. Then you were to take video games, Super Smash Bros., World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Overwatch, Rocket League, etc. They've only been around for only a few years. With the advancement of gaming hardware and software, new games replace current games every few years. Overwatch has been out for 2 years now, and there have been about 4 or 5 leagues besides just the official Overwatch League, and people are already asking, what about Overwatch 2, even though there's new characters released every 4 months. So the game evolves itself every 4 months, but it keeps changing. Smash Brothers is another example of this, where they're coming out with their 5th edition, I want to say, in December. And it's still the same core concept, but there are 5 different games, so it'd be hard to make like a Smash Brothers cafe where it keeps changing, and if a game ever loses popularity, then you have to completely renovate the place. Whereas a baseball, basketball, football, sports bar is always going to be popular in America. Gamers are extremely fickle about what they like, and when the new bigger and better game comes out, we always change to it. There are over 20 games of Call of Duty, and each one is better than the last. So trying to make these cafes or this big area that's dedicated to esports isn't a great business model, as it's very dynamic in the way that it is. Well, that's what my thoughts on this article. Please tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you next time.